Are you a power couple who want to align your vision with your partner, generate more revenue in your business without adding the complexity to your schedule that'll drag you down? That's what today's show is all about. We have Kyle and Ariel Tresch on the show. Couplepreneur is their business. They help couples who are entrepreneurs truly thrive in business, marriage, and life. Kyle and Ariel, couplepreneur. I love this topic because me and Chelsea say this all the time. I feel like business ownership together is literally the greatest marriage counseling. Mm-hmm. So I want to know from you guys, what came first? The business, the entrepreneurship side of you, or the relationship?
Such a great question.
Yeah.
You want to take it first?
Yeah. So I know for us personally, when we first got together, we came from a very small town in Ohio, like small country, cornfields everywhere. And we were both entrepreneurial when we first started dating. And so we dated for about 7 years prior to us getting married. Yeah. And I know when we got married, we actually self-funded our dream wedding in the Bahamas. We both had 2 businesses prior to that. And what ended up happening was, we got married, and I remember standing on the beach and we were thinking, like, it's only going to get better from here. Right? We're both entrepreneurial. We both are business owners. That's like part of what brought us together in a lot of ways. But things didn't quite go as planned.
No, it did not. And I'm sure we can go into a little bit more like what happened after that as we talk today. But I think that when we look at whether business or relationship came first, it's hard to say. I think we kind of both had entrepreneurial spirits as long as we've known each other. Yes. So I would say that, and I'm sure you guys recognize this as well in your own lives and the lives of your clients and customers as well. Those that are entrepreneurial, you know that you're entrepreneurial just by the very spirit that you have inside of you that wants to create, that sees things differently, that doesn't necessarily put a limit on your own potential. And that was one of the things that really drew us together. Yeah. So I would say that probably came first. Would you say?
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just curious about this. 7 years. So it's a long time to date. We did 5 years before we got married. Okay. And I feel like entrepreneurs are so good at taking these big steps of faith. But honestly, for me, I got freaked out. I feel like in that it was like, wow, this is such a big, and we were young. I got married when I was like, I think it was 23. You were 21.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there was definitely this fear element of like, oh, this is a big step of faith. But we do this in our business all the time, right? We take these huge steps of faith. But marriage just felt, I don't know. There was like this scariness to it. There's this even bolder step of faith. Did you guys feel that? Or was there anything in there that was like, why 7 years, or was it just a timing thing?
Yeah, great question. So I would say that the short answer to why 7 years is because neither one of us really wanted to be in a relationship. So we kind of have the opposite of your typical, Cinderella story or the typical like Christian couple online, right? Like where it's like, hey, we dated, we got together, we went to dinner, and I proposed the next week. It was the complete opposite. We actually got out of prior relationships, and neither one of us really were interested in a relationship. Yeah. And as we just, became friends and talked a lot over the years, like we started noticing, oh, wait a second, like we actually can get along really, really well. I could be myself in front of her. I could do the dumbest thing and she would still accept me and love me. And that was really cool. And it started to blossom into a relationship over time. And I would say that when it did come time for us to get married, to your point, there was a little bit of a step of faith that came with it because, at the end, like as we got closer and closer together, I was also growing in my relationship with God. And I was coming to a crossroads of having to truly commit to this amazing, wonderful woman for the rest of my life. And there was a level of faith there because I also, prior to that, I came off tour in a rock band. I had, like a taste of what the world has to offer. And like that part of me was still very active at that time. But just throughout the whole growth process, I did take a step of faith and said, you know what, there's nobody else I would rather be with than Ariel. So after taking that leap of faith and committing to it, it started us down an entire new growth trajectory for not just ourselves personally, but also spiritually and in our business as well.
I think for me, I probably initially wouldn't have taken the leap into entrepreneurship unless it was for Steven. Steven is like full blown entrepreneur, like from the beginning in high school. Like he always had these different businesses, and I did too because I wanted to like make money. Like they're always like, my parent, I didn't grow up with like a ton of wealth or anything. And I always had to work for things. So my motivation was like buying my first car or buying the new cute clothes. But as far as like like entrepreneurship and really like not just having a side hustle, it was super scary for me. So I would love to know, like, just out of curiosity, like what were your guys's like businesses that you had while you were dating or prior to that?
Yeah. Yeah. So they were very different than what we do. Well, for me, it was very different. For him, it was probably along the same lines. But for me, I actually owned a dog grooming salon. So that was my first business ever, brick and mortar. It was, I started in kind of like the animal care industry, and like the natural next best step was just either become like a dog groomer or like start your own salon. And so that's what I did. I will say though, at the time, I don't think I was quite prepared for what like entrepreneurship actually was. I think it was for me just that natural next step. And then it like led me down that path of actual entrepreneurship where I had to learn how to run a business and not just be the person doing the task. And that's very much what I was in my first business.
Yeah, so she had a dog grooming salon. She was also involved in the nonprofit world as well, and got to see kind of behind the scenes of how nonprofits need to get the word out in order to raise funds and also spread the mission of the good cause. And a little bit of that led to what we do today. But even while we were dating and just like learning and falling in love with each other, I myself was a digital marketing consultant the entire time. So basically for me, when I was growing up, I did grow up around entrepreneurship, but I didn't necessarily grow up around like super successful entrepreneurship. My dad was a business owner. I think your dad was a business owner as well.
Both my parents.
And like, they're one of those people that are salt of the earth, so good at what they do, but I would watch them constantly be outsold by their competitors. And at a very, very young age, whether I was a musician trying to get people to come to my shows, or I watched, my dad's business or a lot of businesses basically struggle because of their lack of the ability to get the word out, I was drawn to marketing. So for me, when I was 19 years old, I was very blessed to have a mentor in my life that taught me a lot about marketing. And that was like way back in the day when sales funnels were just becoming a thing. I remember he gave me a Dan Kennedy book. So like, while I was 19 years old, I was like sitting in my bedroom at 10 o'clock writing out sales letters and stuff like that. And long story short, the skills I developed in that season allowed me to work with a lot of amazing companies, building out sales funnels for them, writing email marketing campaigns. And then eventually a lot of these companies would make me the head of their marketing departments. So by the time I was 25 years old, this is all self-taught, all learning from mentors, coaches, coaching programs, etc. I was able to take over an entire marketing department, and we scaled a tech company by several $1 million. And I trained the CMO to replace me. Then I went to a different tech company. We 3X'd that company in a year and a half. And I was just constantly learning and growing. Now, as we're talking about this, as great as this all sounds, here's what you can imagine. I'm growing one business on one side of the house. Yeah. Ariel's growing multiple different businesses on her side of the house. So when you have two entrepreneurs in one relationship, the normal complexity of business just starts to compound. And that's at least what we noticed, where it created a little bit of tension in our relationship. It created some disagreements of how we would talk about life or how we would talk about business, because maybe you guys have been there too. There have been times where from sun up to sundown, every meal of every day, every discussion that we would have with each other was all about business. It was just constantly all about business. And like that continued to get harder and harder until eventually we did make some changes, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well.
Yeah, I would love to hear that, because, marriage, business, they're both these like commitments, right? And you're like committed to this thing, but then you hit the friction point, right? You hit the waves, you hit the valley, right? And you got to go through that. That's where the growth happens. So bring us back to like one of those first valleys, early marriage. You guys got two businesses going. Yeah. What was the moment you guys drew a line in the sand? You were like, we got to change something.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was a pretty dark valley. You know how a lot of couples have what they call the honeymoon phase? Mm-hmm. So we actually had what we call the anti-honeymoon phase, where up until our honeymoon, our relationship was actually wonderful. We were that annoying couple that never fought, never had disagreements, etc. But here's what happened: we self-funded our dream wedding in the Bahamas. Like we just imagined that our life would just get better and better and better from there. But it actually plunged us into what I would say is probably the most difficult season of our entire life. Now, looking back, it was a growth season, but in the moment, it felt like absolute hell. And the reason why I say that is because right as soon as we got married, we came back to our house, and I would grow my business on one side of the house. Ariel would grow her business on her side of the house. And we didn't even know it at the time, but we had two completely different visions of how we wanted to run our life.
Yeah.
And what we learned at that time is that when you have two visions, it creates division in the household.
Yeah.
So we had division on how we wanted to operate on a day-to-day basis. We had division based on where we wanted to go. And it became a real tension point. Is there anything you want to add to that as well?
Well, I remember even at that time, it kind of became this, and maybe this is where you were going to go, but it kind of became this interesting tension of if one of us was successful in business, the other person would experience a failure. And what I mean by that is we had such drastically different goals that if I was successful in my business, you know, it would have had me like, you know, doing things when maybe Kyle wanted to be off traveling. It would have had me staying home and like running my business from home. Yeah. And so there were so many things about our vision and our goals that we realized that if one of us was going to be successful in what we actually wanted, the other person would have to massively sacrifice.
Yeah. And on top of that, you know, how do you navigate being in a relationship with another entrepreneur when things around the house need to get done? Yes. Like whose time is less valuable to go do the dishes or pick up or pick up the groceries or just take care of the things and the responsibilities of our household. These became like immediate tension points as soon as we got married. Have you guys experienced this?
I remember those early days too. Yeah, because you're figuring out that stuff. You know, like you don't really talk this stuff through a lot of times. You're like, who's taking on the task? Who's doing this thing? And so you're figuring all that in the midst of entrepreneurship. I feel like our earlier days, we were running a business together. So at least we had kind of aligned vision. But I want to hear about that because I feel like there's probably people listening that they're like, oh my gosh, that was just a key for them, where it was like our visions are kind of going the same direction, but they're a little bit off. How did you guys come together on vision and like find that alignment?
Yeah. Well, the one day that changed everything for me was a day where I went to a guest room in our house and I just like literally got on my hands and knees, just praying out to God for an answer. Because up until that point, it got so bad that, you know, I thought the answer to our problem at that time, which is like, you know, silly husband logic, was, okay, Ariel, you're entrepreneurial, so am I, but like, I have this successful business. Why don't you just come work for me? That was my solution. And as you can tell, that wasn't the right choice. That just created more tension because I was like, oh, Ariel, you could just be my assistant. Yeah. That would make sense, right? As you can tell, that probably wasn't the best idea. But like, so that only made things worse. And we were literally at a fork in the road. Yeah. And many couples find themselves in this position where they feel like they have to choose one or two really bad options. They think they have to choose, number one, sacrificing their business for their marriage, or number two, sacrificing their calling to marriage in order to succeed in business. And I'm sure that we all know examples of people who maybe chose one of those two paths. Yeah. But we were like, we can't do that. We have a calling in business and we have a calling to each other. How can we make this work where we don't have to sacrifice? So I was in a guest room, literally on my hands and knees, praying out to God for an answer, just to like lead me into what could be a better option. And I'll never forget, I got off the bed and I got on social media, which is not really the place you want to go when you look for solutions. You know what I'm saying?
Would not recommend to a friend.
But in this case, I think it was because when I went on Facebook, I actually saw a live video that Ariel was doing, coaching other people on how to use organic marketing to grow their business. And the reason why she was doing that is because her experience in the nonprofit world showed her how to use social media, all organic marketing, to get the word out about important causes. So then she was teaching other women how to do that from home. And as I'm sitting there looking at her live video, I'm seeing all of these comments from women all over the world telling her how great her stuff was. And for me, I was like, oh my gosh, I am so stupid. If I was going to make her my assistant, I would literally be depriving her and the rest of the world for the gifts that God gave her to shine. And that moment right there literally created a question for us that has changed everything and has unified our visions from there. And that question was, how can we take our individual passions and point them towards a unified purpose for our lives? So how can we come together in unity, but without sacrificing the uniqueness that we have, that God gave us to thrive. So from that point forward, I ran out of the bedroom. I found Ariel. I was like, I am so sorry. Please forgive me. I recognize you're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. How can we make this work where we both win? And that's when we created the third path, the third option, which is you can have a thriving business and a thriving relationship at the same time. Yeah. So from that point, we just created new routines, new habits, new ways of doing life and business together that allowed us to actually become unified. And since then, we were actually able to grow both of our businesses faster while going on more date nights than ever before and actually feeling more aligned than ever before. So that was, I think, the biggest pivotal turning point for us.
Yeah. Did you guys do any exercises? So you had this like pivotal moment where Kyle, you see Ariel and you're just like, oh my gosh, like look at what she is carrying. And I want to like help make that shine, which is such an important thing. Like as spouses, like to recognize like how our partners, like there are unique gifts and how can we help that be amplified? I think that's one of the biggest things we've learned in business together is how can I help Steven do what only Steven can do? And how can Steven help me do only what I can do? So I would love to know for you guys, like, was there an exercise or anything that you do on a regular basis, or maybe that you coach your students on finding that unity in your vision, whether you're running separate businesses or running a business together?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'll let you take that.
Well, there's a couple of points to that. Yeah. Thank you so much for such a great question, because I do believe that there are many people who do have to navigate this complexity. A lot of couples do. And I would say that there's a couple things that we've done that we've learned just through experience and that we've now trained other couples in doing that have been really helpful. So one thing that we have all of our coaching clients go through is something called a unified vision exercise, where they come together and go through a couple of different steps in order to truthfully work out who has what goal towards the future and find a way for them to make that unified in the process. So for example, if you look at all the different arenas of life, like where do we want to live? How much money do we want to make? What do we want our health to look like? What do we want our bodies to look like? What do we want our family to look like? All of these different aspects, everyone listening to this, you have those different goals in your mind. Yeah. But here's the thing, your partner does as well. So if you don't come together and make time to really write out what your individual goals are and give them a chance to write out what their individual goals are, and then ask each other, how can we make both of these happen in a way that is truly successful? Then what can happen is like Ariel was saying, the success of one person could actually lead to maybe what the other person doesn't consider success. And then it actually creates a little bit of subconscious sabotage, because then you may be afraid to fully step into everything you're meant to be, because you're afraid that if you are too big or too bright or you are too successful, that it will actually cause strain in your relationship. So what we do is we have them come together and actually create a unified vision for their family, which is based on their shared goals. It's also based on their shared values. And it's also based on something that we call a priority hierarchy. Yeah. This is something that we learned just by taking like project management skills from leading companies to actually applying it towards our relationship dynamic. Yeah. Where we ask ourselves, based on this season of life, what is the most important thing? So for example, for us, God is always first. God is always number one in our lives, which practically what that means for us is that we'll never make a decision that violates God's word, and that we will always consider him first when we are making decisions. So if that's always first, that's great. But throughout our lives, sometimes business is a higher priority than even some of the things that we're doing in our relationship. Sometimes our relationship is a higher priority than some of the things we're doing in business. Sometimes our health is a higher priority than all of those other things. And it doesn't mean that any one of those things aren't important. It just means that there are times in our life where if health, relationship, and business are all number one priority, there could be a difficulty between a couple where it's 5 o'clock and you guys agreed to go to the gym together, but you're still working on business, and one person wants to go to the gym and the other person still wants to work. It becomes a problem. Now, what we do instead is if we come together and we have an agreed upon priority hierarchy that says, okay, God is first, health is second right now in the season. We really need to take care of our health. Our relationship is third and business is fourth. What that means is that when you are inevitably faced with the challenge in your life to choose what is most important, you already have an agreed upon priority stack that allows the decision to be made for you. Yeah. So it's 5 o'clock and you guys agreed to go on a date night and you still have work to do. Well, guess what? You just stop the work right there and you go on a date night because you guys agreed to prioritize your relationship. And, or if it's 5 o'clock, you still have work to do, but it's time to go to the gym together. Well, that decision's already made. You could just go to the gym together. And making those choices together first before life forces you to make the decision allows you to be a lot more proactive, and it actually alleviates a lot of tension. Yeah. So I'd say those are a couple different things we've done.
It's very cool. What about like communication frequency on that? Do you guys like, check in on that every few months, or like, what is the frequency of even communication around, hey, let's just check in on our hierarchy for this season, or whatever you call it. I don't know, the filter, that we're going to filter the decisions through.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we do is we kind of meet on our like priority hierarchy once a month. Sometimes it's more of a quarterly basis. It really depends on what we're focusing on. So usually it's about once a month. We just like to do a double check with each other. Like, hey, is the priority stack that we're looking at right now, is this still accurate for this month? And like he said, it shifts. There's times where we're like, hey, we're in a growth season of business right now. Our relationship is extraordinarily important, but our relationship is like really solid right now. So we're going to commit to maybe like going a little harder in the business, or maybe we adjust that different priority hierarchy. But yeah, we revisit that about once per month. And then other things that we like to do is we like to have like we call it a weekly strategy meeting. That's more where we're looking at kind of from a project management basis. What are all the things that are happening in our life and in our business? And how are we going to set the week ahead to make sure that we accomplish all of those things in a way that doesn't need to sacrifice all the other different areas of our life? So we kind of once a week, we'll sit down and we'll look at, okay, what's the week ahead? What are the appointments that we already have? Where are we going? What's the goal here? And is that week moving us forward and moving the needle in all those different areas that we're working towards? So that's like our weekly strategy meeting. It's a little bit more big picture. And then we have a daily checkpoint, or a daily check-in meeting. And the daily check-in meeting is probably, in my opinion, one of the single best things that we ever did. Yeah. And I think it's because as driven people, right? If you're people that, you have goals, you have a vision for your future, it's very, very easy to just continually move on a day-to-day basis in a direction that you both think that you're headed, and start to grow apart and start to do, have these expectations for each other that maybe aren't met that day because you didn't communicate them with each other. And so we have a daily check-in meeting, and it's a 5 to 15 minute meeting where we just kind of sit down and we go, okay, based on what we talked about for the week, here's what we have on the docket for the day. Is this still accurate? Do we need to reprioritize anything? And basically we just map out, like, what are we both doing that day? And the reason it's been so helpful for us is because not only are we actively every single day taking those practical steps towards what we're working towards as a couple and as a family, but one of the things that we've noticed in our own relationship, as well as working with hundreds of different couples, is seeing how sometimes there's a little bit of tension that comes up when you don't really know what the other person is doing, especially when you're both working towards something together. I know I've had these feelings where I'm like, I'm working towards this. I'm working really hard. I don't even know what Kyle's doing. Is he doing the right stuff? Is he even working towards what we're trying to work towards right now? Like, what is he even doing? What is his day filled with? And then I start to get angry that I feel like I'm pulling more weight than he is. Mm-hmm. And so when we have these daily check-in meetings, it allows us to both come together, see what the day looks like, know what each of us are doing, not from like a permission standpoint, but just from making sure we're aligned and we're both executing on what we think is the highest priority in our life.
Yeah. And not only that too, like as you're going about your day, if you both are running businesses together, then one partner may be thinking of all of the things that they need to do, not knowing that the other person in your relationship is already taking care of those things. So it enables us both to thrive more in our lanes. And I would say that this one simple thing, guys, if anybody listening, if this resonates with you, if you just implement this one thing, which is just a daily check-in meeting, you don't even have to be working together to make this work for you. You can just in the morning pull out a Google Doc and ask each other, hey, what are we looking to accomplish today? What are the times where we're going to be doing things together? What are the times we're going to do things apart? And how can we just achieve what we want to achieve together? This one thing for one of the couples in our coaching program literally transformed their life in about 30 days. So we had a couple that came to us. The wife is an amazing health coach, and her husband wanted to come alongside her and help her grow the business. And one of the very first things we did when we started working together was holding them accountable to these daily check-ins. Like, hey, just do this. I promise, just spend like 15 minutes a day. Just do this once a day in a line. Yeah. And at the end of 30 days, they came to us and they were like, Kyle and Ariel, oh my gosh. I had no idea how powerful this would be. Yeah. Because literally just by meeting with each other and getting aligned on the same page every day, our business has grown exponentially. But beyond that, our relationship is actually more on fire than ever before. And it's amazing what can happen when we actually just take the time to get aligned.
We get asked all the time, what are your favorite books? So we put together a quick free download of the top 15 most influential books that helped us grow a 7-figure business by age 30.
The cool part about this list is they're actually sequential, from the ones we read at the very beginning to the ones that are impacting our lives right now. With the list, we also have the hookup for audible.com, where you usually listen to the books on a walk or while doing the dishes. This is my favorite way to consume books. If you want the list, go to rainmakerfamily.com/deals. We also have a link to Audible there so you can listen to the books on the go. Again, that's rainmakerfamily.com/deals. So
yeah,
cool.
I love that. I wish we would have done that early on in our entrepreneur journey. We were actually wedding photographers in the very beginning, wedding photographers and videographers, and we had no systems, no KPIs. We had nothing. We did, and by like God's grace, we were always booked, always had jobs coming in, like grateful for that. But we had nothing, like no systems or anything. And so I think that daily check-in would have been so great. And you think about it from a team perspective, like we have a large team now. And what you guys are saying is like things that we implement with our teams. And so it's you kind of like, I feel like sometimes spouses, I can imagine, especially that couple that you talked about, they probably feel like, well, we're living together, we're running a business together. Why do we know what we're doing? But it's like about that clear communication. Yeah. And a lot of people implement that with teams, whether it's like a quick 15-minute huddle, like I know our sales teams does that. Like that's what you already do. So it's like, why wouldn't you do that when you are running a business with your partner to make sure that you're on the same page? It's like you almost separate the two, like, oh, I would do it over here in my business world, but I wouldn't necessarily do it because we're married. And it's like, whoa, like, no, it's actually even more important to be on the same page this way, because you still can't read each other's minds. And especially as if you divide and conquer in your business, like in your strengths, then you know what everybody's working on, which will ultimately, again, bring you closer together and drive more revenue for sure.
Yeah, I think as humans, I think we're very inclined to sometimes take advantage of the people that we care about most. And it's never intentional, but it's simply just we're so much more comfortable with that person that we're willing to sometimes push our boundaries a little bit in order to accommodate. We're sometimes not considering their feelings in a decision because we just, there's such a level of comfort with them. Whereas, one of the things that we've challenged ourselves to really ask ourselves on a consistent basis is, number one, if there's ever like any heated debate, we don't call them fights, we call them heated debates. If there's ever a heated debate, we'll always say like, hey, would you talk to a team member that way? And chances are you wouldn't, right? You would, have a level of like respect, and the way in which you view your words would be much different when you're talking to a team member than sometimes you would with your partner. And then another thing we'll ask ourselves is like, hey, are we like actually being each other's biggest fans today? Because as, business partners, as people that are not only business partners, but, marriage partners and life partners together, are we actually like looking at this person as our most important client and as somebody that we would want to be alongside and work alongside, throughout life, because that's what we get to do together. So we're constantly asking ourselves, how can we be each other's biggest fans today as well?
So good.
I was gonna say, I would love to know, how do you guys, and maybe it's evolved, like you talked about early on about doing like things around the house. So you guys are at your home, like working, or maybe you have an office, or it doesn't really matter, but you still like are under one roof, like married, all of that. Like, how have you like divvied out like household things and roles, and how did you come to that place of like, okay, this is what I'm responsible for, and this is what I do?
I'll tell you a funny story. So, and maybe people that are listening can relate to this, because when I was growing my second business, my first business was a dog grooming salon. My second one was I was an organic marketing coach. And I remember I was growing that business and it was doing pretty well. And I reached this point where I was so capped on time. I had no time left in the day. And I went to Kyle and I was like, hey, I don't have any time left. I think I should really hire like a VA or somebody that can come in and like help me, generate more leads on a consistent basis because I don't have time to do it. And I remember he kind of just like paused for a second. And he's like, okay, wait a second. So Ariel, you spend a variety of your day, not only, generating leads and building your business, but you're also like doing the dishes. You're also doing laundry. You're going grocery shopping. You're doing all these things. He's like, you're going to hire a VA to come in and handle sales, like the lifeblood of your business, while you free up more time to go do more dishes and more laundry and all these different things. And I was like, oh, that's a really good point, actually. So what he encouraged me to do at that time was instead to find somebody who could take care of some of the more household day-to-day tasks that didn't generate revenue within the business. Because at the time, the goal was to grow the business. So we started looking at what are the other things that we can hire out for. So we did. We looked at, how much of my time was going towards managing just the household. And I started to really quantify that and find that even for me without kids at the time, like without having kids, it was a 12 to 15 hour per week commitment just to take care of the house, just to, get the groceries and meal prep the food and all of the things like that. And so we went and we found somebody that was able to take care of those things for us to give me back those 12 to 15 hours a week. And go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and probably that was the best investment of any team member that we've hired up to this point, because now we're so blessed to have an amazing team that works with us. But our very first team member was actually a house manager who can come in and just run the household tasks for us. And what that did is that freed up Ariel to focus on the things that are high revenue generating. And it also focused me as well. And I'm very blessed to say that, and actually I would say both of us are extremely blessed to say that over the last several years, we have not been the ones doing the cooking or the cleaning or the laundry. We have people that do that all for us. And the reason why is, to Ariel's point, I know that there might be a lot of people that feel guilty about that. Yeah. But if the goal is to, generate a significant amount of revenue and your time is best spent doing the things that are God's gift through you, and you are using those gifts to grow your business, it makes more sense to prioritize that and spend your time doing that and let somebody else do the other household tasks for a lower amount.
Yeah. And I know, Chelsea, I don't know if you've experienced this or if any of your listeners have, but I know hiring somebody to take care of the household was a really big step for me. Meaning, I was kind of like raised, where if you were a wife, you took care of the home and you worked as well. I had parents that owned businesses, but like they worked and they took care of the home. And so for me, there was kind of this view that I had that if I wasn't taking care of the home and I didn't have the perfect polished, that the couch looked like a Pinterest couch and like everything looked so nice, that I wasn't really fulfilling my duty as a wife. And there was some guilt that really started to bubble up in the earlier stages of our businesses where I'm like, man, I'm doing everything I can to grow the business, but I feel like my house is a mess and I can't keep up with it. I don't know what to do. And I was so afraid to tell anybody that we had hired a house manager. Terrified. I was so afraid people were going to judge me. I remember even as a kid, there was like, if we ever knew somebody in our small hometown that did have like a housekeeper, they were like the wealthy people that like were super greedy. And like, it's because they think they're too good to do the dishes and things like that. And so for me, that was a really big thing. So I don't know if there's anybody listening, if you feel like, wow, a house manager or housekeeper or anybody like that comes in and takes care of the home. I know there may be some guilt associated with that. There may be some even shame for me that was associated with that. But like Kyle said, it's been one of the most life-changing investments that we've made. It's allowed us to be more of the business owners that we're meant to be, but even more importantly, be more of the people and the husband and wife that we're meant to be as well.
I love what you're saying. And I 100% agree. I would love you to dive more into, cause I'm here. We have moms that listen, and I know we have so many moms that are like, that would be like one thing that would be like so amazing. Like every time I see a mom on Instagram, like folding laundry, I'm just like, you don't have to do it. Like you don't have to be the one, and maybe they enjoy it. I don't know. I kind of doubt it. I'm like, how can you enjoy doing laundry? Like that's how I feel at this point. And I remember like wrestling with when we started outsourcing our laundry, we did a podcast interview and I was processing through it and same thing, like, this is weird. They're touching my clothes and like nobody I knew, what are people going to think? Like nobody I knew outsourced their laundry. And we live in a small town too, so it's not super common, but the more I get in entrepreneurial circles, the more everyone's like, oh yeah, I outsource that. Oh yeah, I do that. So it's made me more free. But I would love to know, like, what about the moms who's listening now, who's hearing that, who wants it, but feels like, oh, maybe that's too expensive. Like how can you help them justify or get over the line of actually, no, this is really worth it? Like, what would you tell them?
I'm going to let you take that because you helped me through this a lot, actually.
Well, one thing that we did early on that was helpful was just, it was a little bit of a mind shift or a paradigm shift of how we look at our time. Yeah. I think to just start with this principle, anybody that's listening, we all know that our time is the most valuable asset that we own. You can never get more of it. You can always get more money, but you cannot get more time. So for us, if especially those that are growing businesses in the early phases, that time is something that you can either make work for you or against you. And early on in the business growth season, your time is the most valuable thing that you can use to invest in the growth of your future. So at the time, one of the things that Ariel and I worked on is we took her hours and we said, okay, for your coaching business, how much do you make per hour? Like when you're actually doing the coaching and you're generating the leads and all that. And it ended up being like something like, I don't know, like $400 an hour, something like that. And we're like, okay, so if that's what you can make $400 an hour activity with, what can happen if you take those $400 an hour hours and use those $400 per hour activities on cooking or cleaning or doing anything that doesn't generate revenue? So to us, it was just kind of a simple math equation where if you could pay somebody $15 to $20 an hour to do those things for you, what that does is that allows you to focus on the $400 per hour activities, and you make the difference up while the one person is doing the cooking and cleaning and laundry and you're doing the stuff that makes money.
Yeah. So we actually started to quantify that we were losing money by doing laundry and by doing dishes and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's so huge. We have a whole podcast episode for anyone listening called How to Never Do Laundry Again. And so it walks you through actually how much it costs in a year, how to hire someone. It's less than you think of how much it costs to have to never fold clothes ever again. And that's made like our best investments of the year podcast episode, 2 or 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
So, but then there's like the flip side. I was thinking like this, like the guilt shame thing is weird because it comes from like somewhere, right? It's like comes from stories we've been told or how we were raised. And like things are changing. Entrepreneurs got to live different. We don't live the normal life. And so we do things very differently. But I find sometimes even when you step into these things, there's a guilt of like, oh, I'm doing this or like whatever. And then there's sometimes the guilt of like, oh, now I have to be working during those hours because I got to be making $400 an hour. But did you ever have that friction of like, I'm just going to like take some time to chill or like get a massage or whatever in those time frames, and seeing the ROI on those things too, right? Seeing the ROI on the self-care and like, we have help around the house. We have a nanny, which is awesome. And we love being with the boys, but sometimes the nanny's here with the boys just so we can be by ourselves, because sometimes that's the greatest ROI. I don't have to be building a funnel or like doing the thing. So that was almost like the next level of like getting over the shame, was like the freedom of just like, my time is valuable no matter what I'm doing, because like, I need to take care of me, So I don't know if you guys had that kind of second tier you had to go through of like, you find yourself sitting on the couch just chilling and someone's doing the laundry or whatever.
Yeah. I remember even when we hired a housekeeper for the first time, somebody came over, a family member came over to our home and was like, I could never hire a housekeeper and just like sit here on the couch like you're doing right now. And I was like, okay. So that it really did. It stirred up in me like this idea that I had to be like, okay, if I'm going to hire a housekeeper, I have to be so productive with that time that I'm getting back. And productive is, we kind of turn this like distortion of productivity into only these X number of things that contribute towards the business or the family or the household and like all these different things. Whereas, we kind of had to relearn that not only are we worthy just as we are as human beings and as who we are, but that rest is actually productive.
So
Rest allows us to show up as the people that we're, called to be. It allows us to show up for the people in our lives better than we ever could have imagined versus, just going and working all day in the business or whatever it is that we're doing and then giving the people that we love our leftovers. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there have been days where, I have those voices that creep in my mind too, whether it's, if I'm spending a little bit extra time studying scripture in the morning or spending extra time at the gym or just trying to get my mind right for the day. There's always those voices, those little shame voices that creep in that say like, you should be working.
Mm-hmm.
Like, would Alex Hormozy be doing this? I don't know. Like, I don't know why. That's like always in my mind. But for good reason. Like obviously they've been able to do a lot of amazing things, but I always had that voice in my head. And then I have to kind of walk myself through that going, wait a second. No, if I take this time now to really create a deep foundation of peace for the rest of the day, that's going to show up in everything that we do. So now we've actually trained ourselves, especially over the weekends when we do take time off and we're able to like rest and be with each other. We've trained ourselves to see that rest is, in a lot of ways, the most productive thing we could possibly do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's so good. I want to like end the show with talking about one thing I think we see in strong like leaders, right? Like you have strong women leader, strong male leader in a household. There can be friction in that. I saw a recent post I think you guys did about this where sometimes a lot of times like that masculinity in a man like wants to like almost like it is almost like threatened by a strong woman. We have a lot of just like very strong women in our community. And I've really learned that too, is like the more I amplify and like serve Chelsea, the better the whole thing does. Like the better the business does, the better everything. I want to hear you talk to that a little bit, Kyle, because I'm sure you guys see that power dynamic of like, like two really driven people that sometimes can clash and they don't realize like they're kind of like suppressing the other person, right? And maybe if you have any stories of people that have kind of gone through that and learned to really, amplify each other and what that's turned into, that'd be super cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we love this topic.
Yes.
So thank you so much for bringing this up because in a lot of ways, this topic seems to be countercultural. I don't know why. I mean, I have my theories as to why, but the idea of a woman having to be in just this little box of what is deemed acceptable to be a woman and what a man needs to be in order to be acceptable to be a man, that has gotten so distorted over the years. And what it has created is this false belief that in order for Ariel to fulfill her duties as a woman, she can't be strong or she can't be independent or she can't run a business. And honestly, like in the very beginning of our relationship, I kind of struggled with these concepts as well. Like that's part of the reason why I thought initially maybe the solution was to have her become my assistant, right? Like she's helping me and I'm growing the business and I'm up in front, I thought that was the answer, but I learned through experience, oh my gosh, it couldn't be further from the truth. In fact, what I do find nowadays, especially for men who are with strong driven women, is that it is the biggest ego challenger on earth. And this is why I personally believe this is why when we did make that post about like this lesson that I learned about masculinity, that we got a mix of people that really loved it and people that were like very triggered by it and they were upset by it, because in order for the male ego to accept that their woman is extraordinarily strong and can stand independently, that's challenging. And early on, that was challenging to me because we would have these discussions and I would think it was my role to always be right or always to make the final decision. We get all these lies fed to us by culture. What happened though is like I had to come to a place of self-awareness to recognize that the reason why I am actually trying to step up and be this macho guy is not out of strength. It's actually out of insecurity. It's because I'm trying to posture myself to be some like this big, strong man in order to just compete with my wife's strength. So that's really what it got down to. So one of the biggest lessons in our life that helped us work together more was recognizing that. And as a man going, no, wait a second. Ariel and I are brought together not to compete with each other, but to complement one another. So if I truly recognize her giftedness in this relationship, like the strongest thing I think I could do as a man is to use my strength to lift her up, not to like shut her down. So for me, that was so very important. And we do share this a lot with a lot of couples, and it does seem to really resonate with a lot of people, especially those that have tried to fit themselves into a box of what is considered masculine, what is considered feminine. And there's obviously a lot of nuances there, but for us, what I think is the most masculine thing, at least personally, my personal belief, is to do everything I can to serve my wife, to lift her up, and to work together, leveraging both of our strengths and maximizing both of our giftedness in order to make the biggest impact possible.
Yeah.
It's huge.
That's huge. Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we definitely went through that. Like, cause I think I was the stronger entrepreneur when we started, cause I was seasoned in it. And I was like, I kind of came in, we started the business, but I was kind of that mentor, like to Chelsea in entrepreneurship. So you'd run everything through me, check this email, do all this stuff, but it created all this unhealthiness that kind of like, as she grew out of it, then she's still coming to me for stuff. I'm like, no, you're good. You're good. And I had to, like, it was like years of undoing that of like, no, your powerful voice, you have this thing. And now it's like, you know, you've been even more stepping into just powerful voice, your own brand, all this stuff. And I've had to learn to just like chill down, right? And not try to interject, not try to do things, just like humbly, like it's like power looks like humility, you know, and looks like, you know, coming underneath, not like having to throw my word in and things like that, you know. And we've even seen that with team too, where it's like sometimes as a leader, it feels really good to just throw your opinion on something. And I've had to really learn to like let people rise. Sometimes you just got to let them do their thing and not feel like I have to like drop a little nugget on their Google Doc just because I'm the leader, you know? Right. And so as we've grown in entrepreneurship, it's like, as a man, like really just like power looks like humility, and power looks like letting other people shine and not having to be the one with all the answers, you know? And there's been a lot of freedom in that, where, you know, I can just kind of let things roll a little bit more, and it's way less reactive, you know?
Right. Yeah. So much wisdom in what you're saying, man. And that, I believe that's what makes you and Chelsea, both of you, as great leaders, because you recognize that. And in humility, from our experience, also precedes honor in a lot of ways, where the opposite can be true too. If when we become prideful, that's usually like the first step towards something going wrong in our life. And as leaders too, whether it's managing our own team or when I used to manage teams of 25 plus for other companies, I had to learn that lesson too. And it was so helpful to take that lesson and apply it towards our marriage, because in order for me to be the best leader, in order for her to be the best leader, we have to recognize the strengths in others. And sometimes that requires us removing ourselves from the equation to allow them to have more room to thrive in the areas of their giftedness without us jumping in and trying to fix everything, because that's how we get validation as a leader.
Totally. Oh man, Kyle and Ariel, we have loved this conversation. I feel like I could talk for hours about do's and don'ts of working together and what, like, I don't know, tips and tricks. And I just know that people are going to be encouraged that, you can totally find like a common ground with your spouse and make it work. And it can be this, I really believe it can be this amazing, fun, joyful, on mission thing when you learn to do it together. So I'm just really believing that those that are listening are going to take this and they are going to like 10x their businesses and their relationships because of this. So if our listeners want to hear more from you and get connected, what is the best place that they can find you guys?
Yeah. So there's probably two places. So the first is our Instagram. So our handle is @Couplepreneurs. So it's like couple and then preneurs. And then we also have a Facebook group that is, to our knowledge, one of the largest Facebook groups of entrepreneur couples, actually. So there's a lot of people in there that, you know, share war stories and everything about growing businesses with their significant other. And that's called Successful Couples in Business. So if you just go to like the Facebook search bar and search for Successful Couples in Business, we should pop up right at the top.
Yeah. Early on in our career, we didn't necessarily have a lot of entrepreneur couples that we knew in our area. So we wanted to create a community where if you and your spouse are working together or you want to work together, you could be in a community of other people who get you and will support you versus look at you like you're crazy because you have the entrepreneurial dreams that you have.
Man,
awesome.
So good.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for being on the Rainmaker Family Show.
Thank you guys.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Rainmaker Family Show. Hey, if you are not a part of our Rainmaker Mastermind, we have a new opportunity for you to book a one-on-one strategy call with one of our Rainmaker coaches.
If you want to get a call with them, see if it's a good fit for you to work with us to build a business that allows you to have time freedom and financial freedom you can get that call at makeitrainmama.com/podcast. That's makeitrainmama, MOMMA.com/podcast.